All right, everybody. It is Wednesday, June 24th. You are here at Community Conversation with Athens-Clarke County Mayor Kelly Girtz. And I am very fortunate today. I have some distinguished guests with me who need no introduction based on the breadth of their work here in the Athens community, but I will introduce them nonetheless. In the order in which they appear on my screen, I have James Ford with Eckerd Connects Paxen and Strong Base. James, if you can say just for a second what both those organizations do, Paxen and Strong Base.
All right. So Paxen Eckerd Connects, we serve, we do GED and workforce development. We serve ages 18 to 24-year-old. It's an accelerated program, so most of our students finish between 5 and 6 weeks. They come in to get their GED. We provide them with interns, and the objective is to put them on track for a career. A lot of people get certified with job, but we try to get them into a career. With Strong Base Inc., it's a youth development program where we target kids middle school age, and we have 4 principles: knowledge, career, community, and well-being. And the objective there is to, for one, be able to equip these kids so that by the time they're adults, they can make better decisions. And also, we understand that not everybody's going to college, but we try to create a plan for them so that so when they graduate high school, they have better opportunities as far as college or trade, and they simply have options when they graduate. So again, Strong Base Inc., we've been going for about a year, and again, we target middle school kids for youth development.
Great. And moving both down my screen and downward in terms of age, we have Derrick Floyd with us, who's with Boys and Girls Club of Athens. Did Derrick talk a little bit about your role at Boys and Girls Club?
Well, our operations for Boys and Girls Club, we have been in it for a while. I've been in my position for over 15 years, but I've been at Boys and Girls Club for over 30. We have youth development for kids ages from 6 to 18, summer and school year, after school programs. And it's something I had a passion for, and something I enjoy doing.
All right. Thank you, Derrick. And moving all the way down, almost to caretaking of newborns, is Wes Zwirn of Prodigies Childcare. So, Wes, you have a handful of facilities here in the Athens area. Talk a little bit about the spaces that you support.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kelly. We have Prodigies Childcare Management, which is a early childhood development, our early childhood development facilities here in Athens, and we operate Little Prodigies Child Development Center, University Child Care Center in collaboration with UGA, the Busy Box Childcare, Busy Box Daycare in Danielsville, and the Piedmont Athens Regional Child Development Center for Piedmont, in collaboration with Piedmont Athens Regional as well. We also own the Trampoline Park Rush Athens here in Athens, which is another youth-centered organization that we have.
Great. Well, if the viewers haven't figured it out by now, we really have sort of a child care focused and youth focused program for us today. Obviously, it's a place that's near and dear to my heart, given the more than 20 years I spent working with teenagers here in Athens, and certainly raising a son, a nearly 8-year-old son in Athens now, something I spend a lot of time considering from that perspective. And so I thought it'd be great to have these folks on and talk a little bit about what life is like, particularly now in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of the racial reckoning that we are seeing in America, and how they're responding to that, and how they see youth fitting into the Athens community moving forward. So I want to hear a little bit more about each of you. I always like to let the viewers know sort of how you got to what you're doing now. And so I'll start with you again, James. Talk a little bit about what you did before you were involved in youth development and how you came to that world.
So I ran a radio station here for about 12 years, WXAG. And ironically, even when I did radio, we always had a youth component. We had a show that's called Education Matters that's been going for about 10 years. And so even though it was broadcast communications, we always had a youth component there. But when I left there, I went into the school system. I was employed at Classic City, and also Foothills. And I also did a lot of work in the community as well as basketball development with Carlos Strong basketball development. And I recognized very quickly, especially in the school systems, I would always ask the young black males, what's their dream job? And they always told me football, basketball, or rapping. And at some point, I just realized, we have to do better. But at the same time, I recognized that these young males give that answer because that's what they've been exposed to. And so one of the key elements with Strong Base is just being able to expose them to more, specifically, careers, so that they can have a better view of what they could be, but also the elements of knowledge, which is academics, the elements of community and how it works. We do a lot of service work. I try to get them to understand how the elements or organizations in the community work with the government, and also well-being, which is financial literacy and health and wellness. And I chose those elements simply because I believe that if I could expose them to those elements, again, by the time they're 18, they can make better decisions. And so the reason that I called I named the organization Strong Base because I wanted them to have a strong foundation. And so, and again, I came up, as a young black male, I faced certain challenges. So I understand some of the challenges that they face today. But again, I just felt like there was more that we can do. And again, there are many other organizations, nonprofits, that are doing similar work here. But I think collectively, there's just a lot more we can do when we look at the plight of young black males here in Clarke County.
Yeah, and particularly that age, and we'll get into this a little later in the program, that you're focusing on, sort of that middle school age youth. I think a lot of people are particularly keying into as this place where there's sort of a fork in the road. Either you're going to create a successful path for yourself as a young person, or you're going to fall into some challenging habits that are hard to break. Speaking of middle school life, I very distinctly remember meeting Derrick Floyd for the first time it was probably mid or late 90s when I was a teacher at Coyle Middle School. And he worked with a lot of young people over there. And interesting that James was just talking about this idea of needing a strong foundation. I think it's probably true not only for kids coming through that middle school period and being deeply engaged in athletics, but you hear a lot in the popular press about even the importance of people who've been involved in collegiate athletics to have some foundation beyond just that sport. And so somebody who certainly recognizes that, I think, is Derrick. So Derrick, when you finished your time in college, what made you say working with kids is what I really want to do?
I didn't. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think it went back way in Miami. I grew up in Miami, Florida. I grew up at a park that was not far from my home. And a coach named Wallace Francis, took on that challenge of developing me into an athlete. And then once I moved on into high school and then I ended up, being recruited by Georgia and attending Georgia. We've always, as an athlete, you always around, those times where you're signing autographs and you're shaking kids' hand, you're talking to kids, and you got basketball camps. So you've always had those interactions with kids, but I came to school and majored in marketing. I was in marketing thinking that's what I wanted to do. And then I was playing softball on a church team, and one of the guys happened to be a youth director at the YMCA. And he saw how I was interacting with the kids and their kids and how I interacted with all the other the players' kids, and asked me, would I be interested in just coming and working part-time? Okay, yes, I think that's okay. I can work part-time. It's 2 days a week. I'm still in school. I can do this. But he stuck me with preschool pals. So I'm with 3, 4, 5-year-olds. I'm daddy daycare all in the 80s. And it was an eye-opening experience because, as an athlete, you're charged all the time to be a role model. You're charged to try to be that person that, that those kids look up to. But they literally was little babies, and they just gave me a different perspective of what my gift was. God is true, and I really accepted it from God, and I really accepted the fact that maybe this was it. So I did. I just I went from 2 days to 4 days to 5 days, and next thing you know, I was 5 years. I was there, and then I gradually went into the Boys and Girls Club in '89. But I did not know. I just knew that after working with those kids, that I had a gift. And it became a vision. And I remember James, he's come by the Boys and Girls Club times too, and kind of helped with some of those kids. So it just becomes one of those situations where, as an athlete, and especially playing here at University of Georgia, those resources became available for me to be a hand for some kids. So being that hand for those kids just made me more happy and more involved in working with them.
Yeah, we were texting listeners, I'll tell you, on Father's Day, and I think I know nobody in the Athens community who really has done more parenting of young people than Derrick Floyd, or Big D, as many of those kids know him.
Yes.
So no, we absolutely appreciate that. And now, of course, Boys and Girls Club operates multiple centers here in Athens. I think of the evolution in Boys and Girls Club since when I started working with kids in the '90s. Great facility on 4th Street, completely rebuilt facility over on the H.T. Edwards campus. So, how many kids does Boys and Girls Club typically take care of in a given season, D?
In a traditional season, we're probably over 400 or 500 kids a year, because we do Winder too. We have another location in Winder Barrow as well. So it's definitely over 400 or 500 a year.
Big crew. Well, and speaking of taking care of a lot of folks, we heard, of course, from Wes Zwirn, who has multiple facilities here, and with his wife Jennifer, kind of a longtime community staple, made the very interesting choice just ahead of a pandemic to buy a trampoline park that then had to shutter for many months, for how long we don't know. So, Wes, I know a little bit about your background, but talk a little bit about how you got from being a student here to ultimately being a daycare provider.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear these two guys' stories, and I'm going to piggyback off of it. And there's a lot of similarity. I had a response. I was going to start talking about how my career path led up, but listening to these guys, it really goes back further than that. It's athletics, and I grew up in sports and had constant, wonderful coaches, and I just took to that, and ultimately ended up playing college football and baseball, and went to walk on at Georgia Southern playing football, and played there for a year and decided to hang it up after that. But the damage was done. All the stuff was there, and it impacted me in a huge way, just in terms of coaching young people. But so I transferred to Georgia. While I was here at Georgia, started substitute teaching with Clarke County School District, and that was huge. I just did that I saw an ad in a paper or something, and did that for what I thought was easy money, and it was very little money at the time. I don't know what they pay now, but it was like
and not easy money, my friend.
No, it was like $25 a day, but man, the kids took to me, and I like Big D, I had a knack at it. And the kids really, what I found is a male walks into those classrooms, and it's amazing, and they just flocked to me. And I knew then that I had a gift for kids. And so anyway, I kind of segued I got a master's degree in agricultural economics, and went to work out of college for a lawn and garden company. But ultimately, I just had a passion. Something kept pulling me back to kids, and somehow I ended up. My wife and I ended up opening a childcare center right around the time we had our first child, and we wanted that. We wanted a certain thing for our kid. It was an arts-based childcare center, and that really worked. But the main thing is just early impressions through athletics, being influenced by coaches and being pushed by coaches. It was just a fantastic base for me to deal with kids and to help kids and to think about interactions and positive interactions and what that can do for a lifetime of what that can do for a positive lifetime.
So I want to transition into talking a little bit about the pandemic and the impact that that's having on people who are doing early education or caring for young folks. And Wes, I'll stick with you for just a minute because I referenced here you go by the Rush Gym up by what old timers around here think of as the old Walmart spot where Athens Church is now off Huntington Road. Obviously a huge financial hit to anticipate that you've got this revenue stream and suddenly the opportunity dries up. But what else in your work, particularly with very young kids, have you had to do to adjust in the midst of this pandemic?
Well, the key word that you just said is adjust. And if I was talking to somebody the other day and I explained to them, if you are rigid right now, and this goes for anybody, families, owners of businesses, and if you're rigid and that's how you operate, you're struggling right now. And there's so many things being thrown at you every day. You really have to be flexible, and it's constant. And literally every day right now, there's something new and unique, and every bit of communication that you put out to parents and to staff, it's more scrutinized than normal. It's more important than normal. But all your operations are a little bit different. Dealing with the kids is actually not a lot of different. It's not really different. It's how your children get into the building. It's parents can't walk in anymore. You have to take temperatures at the door. You've really got to work with your staff on making them. A lot of our staff, just like I'm sure these gentlemen have, are young and they're in college, and they, we've got to teach them and educate them on the importance of staying out of crowds right now and keeping themselves safe, because our parents really, really depend on them, and our operations depend on them. So being flexible and really just learning, being prepared for all the things that could get thrown at you, and trying to stay calm and work through them and communicate, over communicate with your clientele. It's been really the biggest adjustment is the amount of communication that we've had to implement since this all started.
Particularly when I worked with those middle school kids, I always felt like I could never have enough hands on deck. Wes, do you just simply need more people in the building, more people to facilitate that handoff from the front door to the classroom now?
Yeah, so we really have to think about, it's not just throwing people at it, because there's a business aspect to it as well. And I don't want to get too much into the financial aspect of it, but, your business has diminished quite a bit. And you've really got to, you've got to have help in different areas where you used to not have help. And you just really got to think through, and just like when times are tight in any business situation, you've kind of got to tighten your belt. You've got to actually you've got to watch the details and try not to, try to have the right people in the right places, and they might be new places that you've never had to double up on people before. So it's an interesting time.
James, what has this period meant for you, either on the Paxen end or with Strong Base, as you've had to make some adjustments, either in what your afternoon schedule looks like with the middle school age kids, or certainly in what your live interaction model looks like with the GED prep folks?
And so initially, the biggest challenge was, especially with Paxen, we could not hold in-classroom instruction. And so we quickly had to transition to online instruction, which worked very well. We did have one particular student that did not have a computer to complete the online instruction, so we're able to secure him a computer, get him a computer. And so from there, we were pretty much able to operate in the same structure, which was great for us. As far as Strong Base, initially, when COVID came, there was one student that didn't have internet at home, and so I took him into my home. There was another student that had some challenges. So initially, I probably had about 5 or 6 kids at my home, and it was great because with them being that they were with me, we were still able to do things like walk the trails. We did yikes. We were able to go to the Willie Mae Morton Community Garden and still do service work there by working the garden. But one of the biggest things that I saw with this pandemic, which was a positive, was I saw a lot of collaboration in the community. One of the other things that we experienced was, EADC, Chesson Community, Athens Alliance Coalition, 3D Champs, neighborhood leaders. We took part in food giveaways at EADC that helped a lot of people. And so, there were challenges, but, Athens is a resilient city. And so I think the biggest thing is we saw so many people that were willing to, put their heads together, figure it out, and still find ways to help and support our community.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that. I mean, it makes me think about one of my community development heroes, who's the Reverend James Lawson, who worked with Dr. King a lot in the 60s, was key to the Nashville sit-ins. He always made the point that every member of the community can be a contributor, that old people, people who are differently abled and kids can contribute. And beautiful that you have been able to make that true with those young people that you work with. For Boys and Girls Club, Derrick, what operationally did you have to do as you moved into mid-March? It felt for me like it just dropped like a bomb. Well, it had been in the news since before the new year. Suddenly, all the institutions suddenly made that pivot, around the 10th or 15th of March. What was that conversation like at Boys and Girls Club?
I mean, I agree with Wes. I think a lot of us educating, just a bunch of educating the staff and getting them to understand the importance of what we had to do. What we also had a chance to do is some renovating of the buildings. Our staff had opportunity to come in and just make their wish come true, to their rooms, to the build, to the wherever they were going to go, to how they felt the kids received it. So it gave the staff a buy-in. I mean, to figure out, how can they do and what can they do to kind of give us a better look. The staff, to be honest with you, we have staff that's been here for a while, so they was waiting. I mean, they've been anticipating trying to get open, and when the conversation began of will we open and when, they were very proactive in that conversation. I mean, like with parents, parents just want to know their kids are safe, and you had to make sure, based on some of the things the CDC and what they were suggesting, that you were going to do those things. Like you said, check-in temperatures and separating them. Let them stay in a room, and they're in a room with one counselor who's with that group for the day. We have about 54 kids at both locations here. So as our ratio is 1 to 9. We're doing the temperature checks. We're just keeping them in the rooms. We're wiping down, cleaning up, and for the kids, they just want to be here. And once you start having those systems in place, you're gonna have kids want to do something too. They're gonna want to get things to help clean up and help wipe, because they feel like they're doing you a favor, and they also want to make sure that they're doing what they think is what we have to do. But that conversation was tough, because when you have 54 kids, who you pick? What's those 54 where you average 160, 170? And how do you go about that? And so those are one of the challenges. But for us, we just wanted to get in the building. We wanted to get back to some type of normalcy. We wanted to develop for our kids a place that they know as home. And now since they're coming in, they're feeling a little more comfortable and they're feeling a little more happy about being here.
I have to imagine that for every kid who's old enough to form memories right now, in 50 years, they're going to look back at this time and say, oh my goodness, I can't believe we lived through that. We made it through. We had that experience. I mean, in the same way that, I remember my grandparents and great grandparents talking about the Great Depression in the 30s. Just so unbelievable. James, I want to throw it over to you. I mean, one thing that fascinates me about your work is, here you work with these 11, 12, 13-year-olds, and then you work with these 20, 22, 24-year-olds. And I sort of alluded to this earlier that, middle school often is this sort of fork in the road where you see, some kids really key in on some successful opportunities and other kids who struggle to find those measures of maybe what we in the, formal world consider success, but they're certainly going to find something that forges their identity. What are your observations just about kind of having that dual set of clients or kids, young people that you work with, when you see them still forming and then you see them in early adulthood?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Paxen and kids that come in and get their GEDs, I think there's a big misconception that some of those kids are not smart. But the reality is a lot of those kids are brilliant. They simply cannot adjust to maybe a school setting, or they may have outside challenges, home challenges that they suffer from. Then on the other hand, you have those that simply need support. They simply need someone there that they know that cares. They need someone that's going to somehow kind of walk them through the process and give them direction. And it's sort of similar to the youth, whether it's fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade. A lot of them simply need direction, support, and love. One of the barriers that I see here in Clarke County, especially when you're talking with the young people, is that there are a lack of, even though there's a lot of programs that are doing great things, there's still a lack of support and investment in youth and youth programs. But one of the biggest challenges I see in general is sometimes there's a low standard, or there's not an importance of education and work ethic, because I think ultimately that's going to get you to where you need to be. But I think holistically and collectively here in Clarke County, we can do a better job of raising the standards of what our kids could be. I tell kids all the time, dream big. You can change the world, and you can do whatever you want to be. And I think the kids have to believe that. But we have to, for one, expose them to it. We have to support them and give them the same love and support that. And I have a philosophy. If it worked 50 years ago, if it worked for my grandfather, if it worked for my father, it still works today. And so sometimes we have to go back to those same principles. We got to go back to the village, and so that we can prepare our kids for the best, regardless of what age they are. I think before you're 18, you're still a youth. So if it's fifth grade, middle school, even if you dropped out, a lot of times those kids that have the largest challenges need the same or similar type of support.
Yeah, no, and here we are. We're having this conversation late Wednesday afternoon, early Wednesday evening, the 24th of June. Just tomorrow, 24 hours from now, I will be in this same seat for final approval of the fiscal year 2021 budget for Athens-Clarke County. And there's a proposal that certainly seems poised to pass to spend $400,000 supporting middle school youth in the next fiscal year. I think with many of my colleagues on the county commission having recognized exactly kind of what you're emphasizing, that you create that strong foundation, that strong base to kind of use the language of your organization. More positive things are going to flow from that. So Wes, I want to ask you. You've been working with very young kids, 6 weeks old to 4 years for over a decade now. You've seen some of those kids mature now into teenagers, which probably seems crazy to you to imagine, and seen younger siblings follow in the wake of some of those maybe early clients of yours. What's resonant for you, kind of having been in this game for a while now, about what happens early on in life that's necessary for success?
Well, so we were talking about. I was talking about this with my wife Jennifer today, and she remembers early on when she went to a child care center back in her childhood, and she remembers there being a kind of a sarcastic teacher, and they made just a sarcastic comment, and she remembers that 30-something years later, just an off-the-cuff sarcastic comment, and it really goes to show that you've really got to, kids even at this early age are sponges, and it's really there's so many opportunities to positively impact kids even at this early age, and just setting getting an environment, a safe, loving, caring, clean, healthy environment to set the foundation for young kids to have a positive outlet. They're there 8, 9, 10, 11 hours a day sometimes. And that will set the tone for how they go into elementary school. And if they see a classroom situation and they have good memories from the past 3, 4, 5 years, they're going to go into elementary school with a positive outlook, and that will carry them into middle school, into high school, and they may not even ever know. It might just be a subconscious thing, but they will definitely remember it, and that will impact them into adulthood. So it's the first 5 years are so critical, and they just set the foundation for everything else.
Yeah, it was interesting. As my career in education sort of moved through the last 20 odd years, it seemed like there became increasing awareness of how important those early years were. There's been all the talk in the last 10 or 15 years about literacy development, and the notion that either by the time you're 5, you have this vocabulary, or recognition vocabulary at least, that's in the tens of thousands, or you don't, and that if you've not developed that vocabulary, it's going to be an uphill climb to a great degree. So I think that's increasingly recognized, and certainly a lot of the national literature and even emphasis from bipartisan governors associations has been around that investment in early learning. You look at places like New Jersey, where every childcare facility needs certified staff now by statewide requirement, and I could see really over the coming years, probably the whole U.S. going to some version of that. Sort of increasing professionalism, so that there's a curricular component in those early years.
Yeah.
Now, Derrick, it's interesting. James made the observation a couple minutes ago that those things that got our parents through and got our grandparents through are still important components, and I absolutely believe that to be the case. But I was thinking about your time, 30 years working with youth in Athens. How do you observe the state of youth support, or maybe even the state of even being a youth here in 2020 versus in 1990 or 1995?
Well, I think that our youth have, especially here in Athens, have great opportunities to benefit from all the help. I mean, you have, and not only from James, because one of the things James is not talking about, and I want to brag on him about, is that when he goes to those games and work with Strong's basketball league, I mean, those kids are not only paying attention, but they're not only well behaved, but you can see the young man in them and how they're growing up, and that's a testimony to him. That's a testimony of seeing this kid that I know, and I'm now looking at him with James, and I can see that his growth obviously has to come from him, from James. So I think one of the things, as a youth development person, we got to go outside our home field. My home field is right out there, it's Boys and Girls Club. So I have to go outside the Boys and Girls Club. So I go to the schools and I try to go to the games. One of the blessings that I was able to do was join the spotted photographer. I went ahead and became a volunteer spotted photographer. So it gave me access to these youth games and youth events and the schools graduations and the going over ceremonies and the moving on ceremonies for kindergartners and first. So I were able to come to these events, take these pictures, and then show those pictures on Spotted. So now kids thinking they're in the paper, they're looking at themselves in the paper. So I gave them another way of understanding their value. And I think because of what we do and what we're supposed to do as community leaders is to give them value in themselves. I think one of the things, the other thing is now with these middle schoolers and high schoolers too is maybe doing the workforce investment. I remember James said something earlier too about these kids, maybe when it comes to college, are they, everybody's not going to college, but workforce development, learning the basic skills of that and maybe going to a trade, going to Athens-Clarke or going someplace and learning, getting certification. Now you are giving a kid something they can do well to benefit themselves personally, but also get them to a place where they need to be. Athens really does have a great opportunity. I think a lot of resources. During this time here too, a lot of people have been reaching their hands out and reaching and going straight to organizations and helping organizations deal with what we had to be dealing with. I would think that Athens is probably the best place for someone, especially a kid, especially growing up, and the resources that is the possibility, the resources they can get to do anything they want to do.
Yeah, from my vantage point as a parent right now, I tell people all the time what a great wealth of things there are for kids to do in Athens. Just so many places outdoors, so many different sports-related organizations. There are weekends where, we've got so many options that it's hard to choose what we're going to do.
And if I can piggyback on that, Kelly, I totally agree with that. Athens has so many resources, museums. There's always something downtown. But I think the other thing that we have to do is we have to open up our minds to experience something different sometimes so that we can grow and really enjoy all of Athens and all they have to offer.
Yeah, no, it's so true. It is funny when you spend a long time in a community. Sometimes you overlook things that are right there in your backyard. I always reflect on my youth in Norfolk, Virginia. Then went to college there too. Finished my undergrad at Old Dominion, and there was so much stuff there that I never did because it was just up the block, and I never thought about going to do it. I joke that I have a better time now when I go back and visit my dad and my friends who are still there than I ever did when I was actually living there, because it's sort of like I've got fresh eyes. And kind of speaking of fresh eyes and speaking of kind of opening your mind up, we're, in the midst of this pandemic, people have been wound up through 3 months of sheltering in place and the inability to do what they want. Then we, encounter this kind of racial reckoning as the United States with so many of these violent murders that we've seen, at the hands of law enforcement officers, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery right here in Georgia, just a few hours from here in Brunswick. How, and I'll open this up to anybody, how are you talking to kids about this moment when it comes to that racial reckoning?
So,
go ahead, James.
Go ahead, Big D. You got it.
Right is right and wrong is wrong. I think when you're talking to kids about anything, you just you just go as direct as possible to them. When you see wrong, you just gotta allow them to know what's wrong. I think the problem sometimes is that, is sometimes you shelter it. You try to cover it up and you try to say, try to make it sound good. There's nothing good about some of the things that are going on. And because of it, it is bringing a different mindset. But I think at the same time, when you got a kid, when you got a kid that's more concerned about growing up and maybe getting pulled over than the coronavirus. I mean, that's eye opening. But I think at the same time, I would say that who's those ones out there who are not good, and what we need to do is get rid of the bad. Just get rid of them. I don't know. That's a tough discussion.
Derrick, are you hearing kids at the centers talk about this?
No, not as much. Kids are like having fun. I mean, what they repeat is what they hear. Maybe if they heard it that day. I mean, because the next day they forgot about it. I mean, you check a kid that gets in trouble. If you discipline that kid that day, the next day he comes. If you say something to him or her about that, they're gonna look at you like they don't know what you're talking about. They're like, well, that was yesterday. I mean, that was yesterday. You did what you did to me for yesterday. Please don't bring that up today. So for them, it's in the moment. I mean, what they might say is something they might have heard in the car driving over. But I promise you, they're not listening. They're not holding on to something happened a week ago to say something today. So no, I mean, you got a few that probably in conversation maybe heard something on the radio or something that parents were saying and bringing them to the facility. But I mean, kids like having fun. I mean, and the more you can do that, the more they can separate what's going on.
James, especially for your guys in early adolescence, what are you hearing from them?
It's ironic because we actually recorded a show with Education Matters this week that they air on MEU Radio on Saturday, and we were talking about systematic racism and generational curses. And one of the things that I implored them to do is simply know your history. And one of the things that they explain is that in the school system, they feel like they don't really get their Black history, so they're kind of disconnected from it. And I encourage them, if you're looking for ways to explore your history, speak to your elders. They can give you, they can not only give you the history, but they can give you some insight on how they operated, how they dealt with it. Because, I mean, the reality is we're dealing with hard times today, but they dealt with much harder times. And I feel like they did it with, grace and dignity. The other thing that I try to push in the forefront is regardless of the situation, you always have to treat things with love and respect. I talk love all the time, and sometimes in today's society, it's not really, especially when you're dealing with, young male athletes. Talking love is not cool. But I talk love on purpose, just to kind of break the surface and let them know that it's okay. Because when you have a young kid and it's so cool to be macho. Sometimes that macho, I don't say gets them into trouble, but it kind of alters their thinking, and so when we're dealing with, issues that we're dealing with today, for one, I tell them, know your history first. I also want them to try to understand their feelings instead of, following trends or just repeating something someone else. Understand how you feel, But at the end of the day, we have to treat everything that we do with love. And I believe that, what we're dealing with today is a disease. And the only way to cure it is love. People have different opinions, there are going to be different methods, but I just believe love conquers all. So.
And Wes, certainly, you interact with lots of parents. You mentioned you have, relatively young staff. I know from my son Noah having been both at Little Prodigies and University Childcare. You've got lots of 20, 22, 23-year-olds. I'm hearing from a lot of people kind of that generation. What's conversation like around the centers right now?
Well, you're right. We do have a lot of 20-year-old, 20 in the 20s, white and African American and Latino employees. So you just really, coming from where I am, being a white male, my approach right now is to listen. and to not be afraid to ask, to get the conversation started. And I also sit on the board of Chess and Community, and we had this conversation the other day about we don't right now, and this is kind of a little taboo, but it's you got to start a conversation, and you have to be authentic about it, and you've got to listen. And whoever starts that conversation, it doesn't matter, but be there to listen. And that's the approach that I take with our employees. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what color they are at all. You got to listen, but particularly right now, you've got to listen, and you've got to lead by example, and you've just got to be there. And sometimes the best thing you can do is stop talking and just listen. And I totally agree. Just be there, be loving, let them see love, and you're right. If you take that approach, there's only positive that can come from that. So.
No, I like that idea that here we are in this very noisy time, and even prior to this year, we were in a time of lots of noise and lots of conflict and dialogue, and the idea of sitting and being still and listening, I can't tell you how appealing that is to me right now. Counter to some of the other ways of interacting we see. Before I get on to just a couple of viewer questions and some programming notes, I want to give each of you the opportunity to just tell me, when you think about your role in supporting young Athenians, what is it that makes you especially proud? And I'll begin with you, Wes.
Yeah, there's a couple things, and I'll mention both of them. One of the things when I thought about this is sometimes when you walk into a child care center and you've been there with Noah, your child may not want to leave you because you're their parent, you're their safe, you're fun and safe, and going into a new environment, they may want to cling to mom and dad. But what's so cool is a lot of times they'll be there for 6, 7, 8, 10 hours a day, and you will go to pick them up, or mom will go to pick them up, and they cry because they don't want to leave. And when I see that happening, and it happens frequently, when they're crying because they don't want to leave, that's a very, very proud moment for us as a staff, and it's just cool. But more importantly, well, I wouldn't say more importantly, another thing that's super cool is when you go out to eat around town, and you see a couple families that are together that probably met at the child care center at their children's school, and they're out grabbing a bite to eat and just socializing together, and you kind of sit back and you say, man, that's because of the child care center. It's because of children that now all of a sudden families are together, and families they're the foundation of a community, and people are the foundation of the community. So it's those two things are super proud moments for me when I see those things happen.
James, for you, you're sitting on your patio. Kids have gone to bed, and you're looking back over the week. What leaves you proud? What do you think about?
I think the biggest thing that makes me proud is just seeing progress and just seeing simple progress. And I tell people all the time, sometimes you have to acknowledge small progress. Any type of progress is progress. Simple things like going to visit kids at school. And I've seen Big D multiple times at BHL when he goes and visits kids at school. But when you go visit a kid at school and you get a good report from the teacher, that makes me proud. When a child or a youth can come and acknowledge, maybe something that a seed that you planted in them, that makes me proud. One particular incident or situation, if I can speak on it. Just recently, last week, there was a guy that I started working with some years ago. I'm gonna give his name, Xavier Coates, because I'm so proud of him. But he initially told me he wanted to work in ag, and so when he told me that, I got him a job at the Athens Land Trust, and then from there, I encouraged him to go to Fort Valley, and so he did that. He's at Fort Valley doing well, and he sent me a text last week. Because he got a promotion for, I think, manager for maybe one of the programs at Athens Land Trust. And so he sent me a check just saying, thank you. Without you, I wouldn't be. And so that right there, just, I said, the work that we do is worth it. Sometimes you can't save them all, but, if you can save, a couple, I only want to say a couple because we're going to save more than a couple, but just small things like that make it all worth it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I often would say to young teachers that the one thing that I wish that they could know and feel and really embrace in their heart is that the work you're doing now is making a difference. When you're first working with young people, you don't know that that's true because you don't have that continuum of experience. You don't have the Xavier, who's in your phone, who you've known for 5 or 10 years to look back on and say, hey, I met this shaky kid and now he's in a great place. But that work is making such a difference. And Dee, I'm going to end with you. When you look at your work, what leaves you proud?
First, let me get a disclaimer too. Let me first say too that I wouldn't be. I have to say because this one of my kids that I raised, I guess you might say, through when I started the YMCA as a police officer. So I got to say we need the police officers because he would be bad if he ever hear me and I didn't say that. I have to agree and disagree with you. Just one of the things when I walked in that first day, I had no idea what I was going to be getting into when I worked with those preschool pals. Did not know. That first day, I didn't. But when I left that first day, I knew because the next day, every day, those kids was giving me everything that I thought I didn't, everything I was giving other kids. I mean, when you walk in that room, they're so happy to see you. And when you go out there and play, they want to be the one playing with you. So, I mean, I've been working with kids for over 30-some years. So just think about now, I'm seeing kids came to the Boys and Girls Clubs. So as I see them, they come in there, they see me, and now they're more eager to put their kid in the program because they can tell their kid, hey, he was there when I was there. And the kid look at me and say, well, you old then. My dad, I know you old. He's older than, or you old then. But I'll get every day I get to come to a place to impact kids. And I know I'm coming to impact them. I mean, that's intentional. I come intentionally to be at work to make sure that I become an impact to them. So what better feeling is that? To know that when you walk into a room and walk into a building, there are going to be these number of kids looking forward to hearing what you say, what you're not saying. And believe it too, you got to be careful because what you say is gold and God to them sometimes. They go home and tell their parent, Mama, he said that we don't have to do this. And you be like, oh, and then they call him. My son said that, you said that he needs to do it. He don't have to do his homework until after he eat. I'm like, no, I didn't. I didn't say that. I said when I did my homework out there. But these, kids look forward to being what you speak. So I think, I tell you, I would do it for free. I tell you, I would do it for free. I spent a lot of years with other people trying to get me to do something else. From moving out of the youth development to doing something else. And I never considered it because I knew every day I was walking in that building, I had somebody's ear. And I was responsible for making sure that what I was telling him, I was doing. Him and her, when I was telling him and her, it started with Boys Club, and then that became Boys and Girls Club. So what I was saying to them, I had to do it. So I grew up. I became, even though I was old enough to work, I realized I started growing up when I started working with kids. Because when you start telling kids something that you don't want them to do, you had to make sure that you wasn't doing it too. Because like Wes say, when you go out to eat, you become a celebrity sometimes. Those kids are out there watching you and they yelling your name. And the parents, some of them, they with grandparents, they have no idea who this person is they yelling at, who they just ran from to go see. And you shaking their hand, and all of a sudden you got to almost pick them up because if you don't pick them up, they're gonna be like, "Why you not picking me up?" And now you got this person looking at you like, "Who just got my grandson in the air? Who's holding my grandson?" So I think it's my day is Man, I tell you, there's no better day than waking up knowing that God has given you another day to really be able to impact another kid's life.
Well, I can say, as somebody who is grateful that the Lord put you here in Athens, D. We are glad for you, and for you, James Ford, and for you, Wes Zwirn. Thank you all so much for being here with us to have a conversation tonight. It's been great dialogue. You all know that I will be reaching out to you soon for other community needs, but I really appreciate you spending this hour with us. Don't have time for any questions tonight, but I do want to leave a programming note. As I mentioned earlier, tomorrow night's Mayor and Commission meeting will begin at 6 o'clock. We will be finalizing the budget, and we also will be approving an agenda item that will widen the crosswalk on Broad Street and move the monument out to the former Civil War battlefield off Timothy Road, and create a seating area on College Square between Clayton and Broad Street. I do want to mention that while we have been coming to you weekly here on Community Conversation, we are going to be moving to monthly. So the next program is going to be the fourth Wednesday in July, and that's going to be our normal schedule, at least as anticipated right now, unless we have some special episodes. We'll be doing the fourth Wednesday in July, 6 to 7 p.m. I'll soon be announcing what the topic of that next conversation will be. Again, Derrick, Floyd, James Ford, Wes Zwirn, thanks so much for being here. Everybody out there in Athens, talk to you soon.
Wes, nice seeing you, man.
All right, take care, guys.
Yes, sir. See you, James.